There's no pain-free way to end relationships with people. It's always going to hurt to let somebody go. It's always going to hurt to sever a partnership. Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. This is Ben Kinney, and today, ladies and gentlemen, I have a sad announcement. Bob, Chad, it's a hard time to say this, and I don't want to have to say this, but I just want to let you guys know that things aren't working out between us, and that I think it's time that we go our own separate direction.
Finally!
I was just going to say the same thing.
I feel like I've been under this guy's thumb forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever been put into a position where you knew that there was a relationship that you had personally, professionally, that needed to end? You didn't know what to say, or you delayed doing it, and you held yourself back from finding that perfect partner, that perfect friend, that perfect opportunity. Sometimes things need to end. Today's episode follows up a recording that we did on how relationships matter. We ended that discussion with an idea that whenever possible, we fight to keep great relationships going, but sometimes things need to end. So today, we're going to talk about how to end things right. Different types of things in our life need endings. We need to stop a project, maybe abandon a department, Chad, or a company. We need to walk away from some investments. I remember seeing this old Charles Schwab commercial that said, waiting for a stock to rebound is not long-term investing. Stuck with me all these years. Sometimes we got to get out of business with a partner, or employees just need to go. Friendships that just don't provide the same value or drag you back or down or creates too much drama or chaos for you. Could be as simple as habits that need to change. And lastly, it could be a real personal relationship. I've heard the same things like, waiting for your kids to graduate high school is not a long-term relationship decision. There's lots of things that need to end. And by delaying it, it only harms everybody involved.
That's a key point you say right there, Ben. It's that it harms everybody involved to keep something going longer than it should.
There's no kid or employee, partner, or friend that doesn't observe that the relationship is not as good, strong, or as valuable as it was before. Mm-hmm. There are relationships that end, and it's a good thing. Why is it a good thing? Because, Chad, it creates space.
Yep.
Bob, it gives us more energy back.
Yeah.
We have more time on our calendar. Maybe now we have more resources like money. And that space that's created is good because it makes room for whatever awesome is next. I mean, think about it, guys. How many jobs did you have to quit or leave to get to where you're at today? How many relationships, don't say it out loud, your spouse is listening, that you had to go through before you found that person?
Yep.
And how many friendships have we cycled through before we've realized who matter over time?
Still working on that one with you.
And who doesn't?
There's a quote from a book called Necessary Endings, Ben. The quote says, whatever we are doing today may be the enemy of what we want tomorrow. So a lot of this stuff you're talking about, some of these good reasons why we end relationships are because we need to free up that space, that energy, that time, that money potentially for that thing we want tomorrow.
That book, Necessary Endings, is one of the early books that I read in my business career quite a while ago. It was by Dr. Henry Cloud. And just the cover, I have it in front of me. It said, the employees, businesses, and relationships that all of us have to give up in order to move forward. What are some things, Chad, that cause, we're going to call them the gross. What are some gross, like gross? What are some gross, GROWTHS right? What are some things that cause relationships to end? Give me one of them.
Well, Ben, one of those would be, we grow apart.
And you look over at your partner and you say, I'm doing all the work, or I'm giving 100% and you're not. Or you wake up one day and you realize you just don't have that same relationship with that family member as you did before.
They say we change every 7 years. And the challenge with a lot of relationships is sadly, and that's where that 7-year itch concept came from. It was because we start to grow apart instead of in many relationships, we hope we're growing together. So maybe we've just grown apart, as you say, in this situation, and it's time to make a change and a relationship has to come to an end. That's not just personal. That'll be in the business world as well because people just change.
Do you guys remember the analogy of how many different adjustments a rocket needs to make on its way to the moon?
Yeah, 10,000 or something.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? And what if they miss one? Where do they end up?
Mars.
Venus, Pluto, I don't know, far away. Like, that would be bad because 1 degree of separation today over time, you wake up and you're not an inch apart anymore. You're miles, right? Or thousands of miles or planets or, solar systems apart from each other. Relationship ends because 2 people grow apart. What's another reason that relationships end?
Well, how about there's just no growth?
It's stagnant.
Yeah, it's going nowhere.
What happens in water when it gets stagnant?
Ugh.
It creates viruses? I don't know.
Yeah, mosquitoes poop in there, and they have mosquito babies, right? And the only thing cute that's ever in there is like those little pollywogs, like before the frogs crawl out. But it becomes scum, right? There's no growth from either person, and they just wake up one day out of a fog, and they look at each other and like, whoa, we aren't doing anything together.
And this
we're
can be,
going nowhere.
This can be business again, as you're saying. It could be a relationship, and then it could be somebody that you've been in business with, and you've realized we're not growing as a company. We're not growing in our opportunities any longer. It's time for this relationship to end.
You wake up and you said, there's nothing positive happening at all, except for we get to split the mortgage every month, right? Or we both get to split that office space that we're paying for, or however that type of relationship is. There's no growth at all. Well, another thing that happens is 2 people, 2 employees, 2 partners, spouses, parents, kids, whatever, right? Friendships, they grow at a different pace.
Yeah.
What's the cheesy quote? Couples who grow together, stay together.
I think there's a version where it actually rhymes or something along those lines. Yeah, you're probably close on it, and the idea is there for us, Ben.
And I've seen it because you see an employee or a boss goes to all the self-help. They start reading, listening to things, right? You see in relationships, one person starts getting healthy, losing weight, exercising.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see it where a boss is reading all these books and listening to podcasts and going to self-help things and taking a well series or whatever, and they wake up one day and they realize there's such a gap between that person's goals, drives, ambitions that they almost feel like they're 2 different people now.
Yeah.
Even though you started off at the same line, right? The same starting line.
Yep. Instead of growing apart, they're growing the same direction. One's just completely outpacing the other.
I think the other place that you see this is inside of an organization. You'll see people that joined around the same time, and one employee has really spent time after hours learning the product and just developed their knowledge outside of their job, and all of a sudden you look up in a year and you're like, man, look at that guy, he's growing forever, and that other guy that came in at the same time as him, he hasn't grown much at all. So it's not just like your relationship with somebody else growing at a different pace. You can actually watch, like, inside of an organization, people growing at different paces as well.
Yeah, I don't necessarily value people that work a ton of hours, but I really value people that think about our organization, our company, or our priorities after hours. They read about stuff, they're learning about stuff, they're improving their trade, right? And those people get unequally rewarded in our company, even though, as you said, Bob, they could have started the exact same day. They just grow at a different pace.
Which easily leads us into the next piece on that, Ben, from they're growing apart, they're not growing at all, they're growing at different paces, is the future to grow into that's ahead.
You probably see this in relationships. You get people that are thinking in a year or two the kids are going to be out of the home, and they look up and they realize the only thing holding them together was taking care of those children together, right? There's no future for them to grow into. Or even an employee in your company, they wake up and said, well, the company isn't growing and I could stay here as long as I want, but it's never going to be an opportunity for me because the company is not a growth company.
I would say that's probably one of the number one reasons people leave a company is they can't see a future beyond where they are today. And so they realize, like, as I grow, there's nowhere for me here.
And sometimes that comes from me, and I look down and I haven't given that person opportunity for a while, and I realize it's because I don't see them as having a future with me. I don't enjoy spending time with that person, or I don't enjoy how they treat people or their contributions, and it could not even be their fault, but there's no future for that person in my company, which means that we owe them the truth, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute. All these things added up, Chad. People growing apart, one degree at a time, until we're in two different planets. No growth at all. We wake up and stagnant. Grow at a different pace, even though, Bob, we started at the same exact, starting line. Or we realize that there's no future for us. What are we even doing? It makes no point, right? What happens, Chad? It's the last thing.
Well, resentment's going to grow because of all of that.
Resentment is a wedge, right? You guys ever chopped wood? We take the maul, and you put it in there. And that wedge, you keep tapping it. What happens to the big piece of wood?
Split it right in half.
Yeah, it'll split it right in half. When there's a gap created, the gap gets filled most likely with resentment because you don't resolve issues quickly enough. You don't grow at the same pace. You don't try to pull each other back together quickly. You allow this gap to sit there for years and years, and all of a sudden resentment is there. And that's what causes so many ugly breakups in business, in friendships, in marriage, in all types of relationships because of this ugly word called resentment. Resentment destroys all. It is a virus. It just eats and eats away at both parties until you look up and you see these past people that used to be married, and you're like, I don't recognize either one of them anymore. Look at how they're treating each other. Like they're not the same person. And they're completely justified in their mind because that resentment creates that justification. Now, some relationships should end and some relationships shouldn't. It's the first step. Can you take some time to realize what would it be like if I was no longer in business with this person? If I no longer had this person in my company, if I was no longer friends with this person, if I was no longer in a relationship, if that is hard for you or if that is unbearable, do whatever you can to repair the relationship first before you just jump into ending it. That is step one in this whole conversation. Ask yourself, could you live without that person? And if you can't, then spend every moment working on repairing that relationship.
You know what's really hard about that, Ben, is I think it's a lot of times it's obvious to look around and go, okay, that's a dead relationship. I just need to get rid of that thing, right? Or, wow, this is a really sick relationship and I need to do something to improve this relationship or get it back on track. One of the hardest places, though, is around mediocrity. This idea that I have people that they do an okay job or maybe they even do a good job, but it's not great. Right? Like sometimes the hardest ones to analyze and realize, like, what should I do in this case are those ones that kind of seem good, but they're maybe holding you back from something even better, right? So they're dead relationships or the ones that are sick, really easy to figure out. It's those mediocre or good ones that I think a lot of people struggle with, which is why we stay in these relationships that are mediocre when there could be way better relationships or opportunities beyond that.
Yeah, or you stay in a relationship because of how long you guys have been friends, or how long you've been together or been married, or how long you've been in business together, not realizing that it has to end. It doesn't mean that the relationship itself has to end. It means that some element of it does. That maybe the relationship should end, but not in every possible way. It just means that it needs work. It just means that something has to change. A good example would be, you got those 4 or 5 buddies or girlfriends that you grew up with, and you realize after 10 or 20 years, like the only thing that you guys have in common are a bunch of nights that you regretted out at the bars for the last 10 or 20 years, right? And every time you get together, you have nothing in common to talk about. There's just a gap that's created. It doesn't mean you have to kick them out of your life. You just purposefully start finding a new circle of people that will lift you up and take you to that next level.
Ben, right now might be a perfect time for a lot of people with these endings because of what's been going on in the world. We've been sheltered. We've not spent as much time with certain people. Maybe that's a great indication to you to do that project Ben was saying, where you sit down and look at these relationships. Maybe some of these friendships don't need to be started back up again. Maybe some of these relationships don't need to be started back up again. Maybe some of those employees don't need to come back to work. And heck, maybe even just some of your habits and relationships with yourself. This is the time to change them because you've had that opportunity.
Yeah, relationships change. They go through seasons. I use this phrase called love and results. Like, I've had situations where I've been in business with somebody who's also a close friend, and we're no longer in business together, and we're still close friends. And I've had situations where I've been in business with close friends, and we're no longer in business together, and we're no longer friends. Same thing, personal relationships didn't work out, still friends. Some of them, not friends, nothing, right? Yeah. So how do you figure that out? How do you figure out what relationships are worth maintaining and what relationships are worth ending? I would like you to imagine a teeter-totter.
Got it? Seesaw.
Right?
For those
a seesaw,
of you. Seesaw,
ladies and gentlemen, or like a scale. A scale. Like, if I was to sit on the teeter-totter, like, I would go down, Chad would go up. That's just like, that's a matter of physics, right? But what we want is we want a balance. Imagine on one side, there was this guy called love, and on the other side, there was this guy or gal called results. There has to be a balance between those two words. Here'd be an example. For me to be in business with somebody, I like to use the word love. I'd like to say that I love that individual. I would be at their wedding. I would be at their funeral. I would invite them over to my house, right?
Two out of three so far I'm good on. So.
Speaking of which, I was at both of your weddings.
You were?
And we've both been at your house.
There we go.
Ben wore his dress vest. He had like his most dressy vest on at my wedding.
That was pretty fancy for me.
It was a fancy vest.
Yeah. So, do you love the person? Do you care about them? Because if you don't truly love somebody, you're not going to spend time with them.
Right.
If you don't spend time with them, they're going to start to resent you. If you don't love somebody, you're not going to promote them. If you don't love somebody, you're not going to invest in them. You're not going to give them gifts. You're not going to reward them. You're not going to create opportunities for that person, right? Well, the other side is results. I could care about you guys, but at the end of the day, if you don't get results in your job, right? If you aren't doing what you said you're going to do, if you aren't keep your promise, if you aren't moving the company forward, right? You're holding us back. And doesn't matter, no matter how much I love you, is not going to create justification in my mind for me to allow you to hurt everybody else in the company.
It probably creates the opposite of that, which is resentment.
Exactly.
Wait a minute. So the opposite of resentment, in this case, is resentment?
No, it's just if he's not, if we're not getting results, he starts to resent us. Right? I would think, right? The opposite of results would be resentment, I think.
That is exactly right. If you're not getting results in the job, I'm going to resent you. Now, there's a really good chance if you aren't getting results in the job, you're also going to resent me.
Yeah.
You're going to say, hey, the leads are weak. The leads are no good. You're not helping me, right? The product sucks. Like, over time, resentment is going to build up. And I've had situations where I've allowed resentment to grow up so large in my companies that it justified that person stealing from me. And I believe wholeheartedly in those people's minds that they did it and they didn't think they did anything wrong. They felt that they deserved it because their resentment had grown so strong.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at personal relationships, marriages end sometimes really, really disastrously because resentment gets built to the point where that person you loved, it festers something fierce.
Imagine, Bob, that you're the number one sales guy in the widget company that we operate. and we're selling widgets and you're number one, but I don't like you. I don't like how you talk to people. I don't like what you do after hours. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that I don't respect about you. So I'm going to have this picnic this weekend, right? And I'm going to invite everybody in the company over, but you, because I don't like you, right? How are you going to feel?
Resentful.
Yeah. When I have an opportunity to go to a training event, I'm going to bring Chad with me because I enjoy hanging out with Chad, but not you because I don't like you.
Now I'm more resentful. I'm like, I'm the guy getting all the results. Why does he loving on that guy?
Yeah. So when I don't love you, resentment's created, right? When you don't get results, resentment is created. And it's created on both sides, right? And I'm like, hey, I'm helping you succeed in your role, but I don't actually like you. So I start resenting you too because I don't like you. Those are relationships that should end.
So Ben, let me ask you this question. The seesaw here, the teeter-totter that we're talking about, these scales that we're balancing on, they're not going to just sit there at some perfect straight line. It's going to keep moving back and forth. Bob might be getting great results, and then you're going to realize I've got to lean in on that love to tip that scale back. And you might actually be loving him while his results are dropping a little, and he's going to end up realizing I got to bring my results back up. So this isn't some static straight line. That's why we're putting it on a scale analogy or that seesaw analogy, because you're making sure it's always staying as close to center as possible.
Because I care enough about Bob when his results start going down, because I love him, I'm going to reach out and say, Bob, I see that you're not having a good month. What's going on? You have something in your personal life? Like, how's the bride? Like, kids or your health? Like, you're not performing like the Bob that I know. What's up? And I'm going to help him get back on track, right?
Yep.
Or I might wake up one day and I'll say, you know what? I've been so busy getting results. Bob's been so busy getting results. I realize that our relationship is non-existent. So I'm going to reach out to Bob and say, we need to spend some time together. Like, let's just catch up. Let's spend a day. Let's do something. And you have to be purposeful. I'm glad you said that, Chad, about maintaining that balance in the relationship. So at the end of the day, let's say that there isn't love or there isn't results or both of them aren't there. And we're at a position where the relationship truly needs to end. Let's walk through some of the advice that we could give you all about how to end relationships in the right way. As we get started in this conversation, I want to make a couple of statements. Number one, there's no pain-free way to end relationships with people. It's always going to hurt to let somebody go. It's always going to hurt to sever a partnership.
If it doesn't, I think that was a key sign we waited a little too long.
It's always going to hurt to end a friendship or to end a relationship, right? That is just something that you have to understand at the beginning, that this is going to suck and it's for the better. Everything that you have today is because you quit something in the past, right? Every relationship you quit to get to the relationships that you have today and the friendships and partnerships and so on, right? The second thing I'm going to tell you as you're having this conversation with somebody is to be committed to the ending. Mm-hmm. When you step into that room, I want you to have 100% confidence that your goal is to walk away from this relationship severed. We are no longer going to be in business today. We are no longer going to be partners today. You're no longer going to work here today. We're no longer going to be friends today. We are no longer going to be in some sort of a relationship, like a personal relationship. You got to be committed to it. Because if you're not committed to it, remember, you're either working on staying together or working on staying apart. If you want to stay together, walk in there and say, my goal today is to find a way for us to stay in business, stay in relationships, stay friends together. Or you're walking in with clarity to say, here's the deal. My goal today is to find a way for us to sever this.
Yeah, you don't want to walk into a relationship that you're about to end without that confidence that that this is the end, because if you were to say, hey, I brought you in here today to talk about the end of our relationship, but you weren't actually sure about it, they argued their way out of it, or what? Now they walk out of the room, they're like, Jesus, Ben wanted to end that relationship with me, and I just saved it somehow. Like, that's disastrous.
Yeah, how many times have you guys had a trial breakup with somebody?
Yeah.
or a trial firing of somebody, right?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the makeup sex, like that's just a bad idea in general.
You know, Ben, we've had this conversation for years, and I was in a relationship at one point in my life that was disastrous for where I was and all of that stuff. And I remember we took some time apart, and when we came back together to have the conversation, she was sitting at the table waiting to make it all work, whatever needed to happen to make it all work. Yet I walked in there committed to the ending. And as soon as she started talking, I said, is it okay if I interrupt you before you go any farther? This is over for me. It doesn't matter what you say. This is over. I'm committed to the ending of this today. And it was a necessary ending for me because it changed my whole path. It was something that needed to be done that I had been putting off. Resentment had built. So you've been teaching this lesson for a long, long time.
So this goal is to have a clean break once you understand that it's the right choice for you. Couple pieces of advice. Number one, don't get into details. You don't need to go through and say, Chad, the reason I'm breaking up with you is that you don't take the garbage out, right? And you didn't do X, Y, and Z, and we had this past issue, and remember that time in college when you kissed that girl. Like you don't need to go line item through line item of all the flaws and the mistakes and the reasons. Or, Bob, the reason that we're no longer being business together is remember that time that you emailed the customer and you said that they were stupid, even though they were. You shouldn't have said that. And then you did this, and then you talked behind my back, and then I found out this, and then I saw you were playing Clash of Clans on your phone. And like you don't need to go through this line item of things. You're making a clean break. It doesn't matter.
Bob, I think it's our turn to go through the line items with Ben.
No, as we move on, it's also not a debate. You've made the decision.
Yep.
It's not a two-way decision anymore. You've made the decision. You're not walking in there to discuss it, right? You're not walking in there to say, what should we do, right? And you're also not walking into that situation to protest, to go back and say, no, that's not true, right? That's not true. None of those arguments matter at all. You don't want to turn this other person into an enemy. You don't want to make this about what they've done wrong, right? Every moment you spend living in the past is stealing from your present and your future. So I want you to sit down, have a conversation, and be very clear in the very first sentence, which would be similar to, Bob, I want to let you know that today, the company and I, we've decided to go into a new direction, and your position is no longer needed in the company. I want to walk through the details of what that means to you and answer any of your questions. But before we begin, I want you to understand that this is a final decision and it's not up for debate. And I want you to know that I very valued the years and time and energy that you spent with the company. Do you have any questions?
Glad it was you, not me, Bob.
Yeah. No, severance. I heard you guys do severance around this joint.
That's all you need to say. In the friendship, Chad.
Oh, wait a minute.
There it is.
Chad, you and I have been friends for a really long time. And over the years, there's a lot of things that we've done that I appreciated, and I have a lot of memories that I'll never forget. But in the present, I want you to know that I don't feel like we bring each other mutual value, and there seems to be a lot of drama and chaos created in our interactions. I'm just going to ask today that we take a break from this relationship. And in the future, if we both come back to the table with an open mind and an open heart, then I'd be open to that discussion. But from this point forward, I'm going to move on. That's it, right? You sit down in a relationship and just say, "Hey, I just want you to know I've thought a lot about our relationship, and I think today is the day that we go our own direction. And I've thought a lot about this, Chad, and I don't feel like there's a path moving forward, so I don't want to discuss that. I'd like to spend some time today coming up with a plan on how we could go our separate direction. I understand that this is a difficult thing for you to hear, and if it's not the right time, maybe we could get back together tomorrow or the next day and come up with a tangible plan, and I'll bring one to the table. Are we good?"
Yeah.
It sounds a little heartless, Chad,
Sure.
but it's going to hurt no matter what.
Yeah.
You could take an hour to say the same thing, or just walk in there and say, "Chad, this partnership is not working out. I think you're a great person, and I really value what we've done together, but we got to find a way to end this partnership today. I brought together 3 or 4 solutions or ideas that I could put on the table. I'd like us, before we're finished, to pick one of the 4, unless you have an additional one you'd like to add to the list.
When this episode's over, I want to make sure we're okay, because you're giving me that look, Ben, like we're actually having this conversation live with everybody. Yet, here's the thing, and you're doing a great job as you're having these conversations, Ben, and one of the things I want to make really clear that you're doing is you're doing it in person, right? Don't be that guy or that gal, but don't be that guy who's doing this over text. Yep. Don't send an email that says, thanks, don't come back tomorrow, whatever that's going to be. You've got to do this face-to-face.
Yeah, when possible, right? Whenever possible. That's your first goal.
Sure.
Sometimes you're going to have to do it via video, and there's been times that you'll have to do it over phone, depending on the structure of the relationship. But yeah, Chad, I think that's a really good advice. Now, you walk in basically with a message that you've pre-written out that's very succinct. And I've even walked in and say, Chad, I want to talk to you about something very serious today.
He's reading notes, just so you know, folks.
And if it would be okay with you, I'd like to read you what I wrote. Dear Chad, the last 5 years working together has meant a lot to me. And I walked through line by line what I was going to say. And at the end, Chad, do you have any questions? And it's that direct. Now, what you hear from me, it's not a sense of coldness or heartlessness. I've let a lot of people go in my career. I've ended partnerships, and I've ended relationships, and I've ended friendships. I've created space in my life for amazing friends, for great family, for great relationships, for great partnerships, for great employees, right? I've created a lot of room in my life. And that's what gives me the strength to have these tough conversations. What I want you guys to do is to think about, how can you end things right by doing the preparation, having the conversation, being committed, understanding that there's no pain-free way to do it, by don't diving into the details, the debates, or the protests, and being clear that the future is going to be better for everybody.
Now, you've heard it before. You've heard this quote thrown around from people who will always say every ending is just a new beginning. And just because we're bringing this episode to an ending, that just means there'll be a beginning of another episode very shortly for you here at Win, Make, Give. Make sure that you are following the podcast. Make sure that you are connected with us on Facebook, facebook.com/group/WinMakeGive. Make sure you're sharing this with everybody, because there are people out there who have things that need to end in their worlds right now, and this might be the episode that helps them get there. Until our next episode, we hope you've subscribed. We hope you've left us a rating and a review by this point. And remember, wash those hands, and as always, do good.